Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hello, and welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing new hire functional onboarding, and we're looking at some of the trends and priorities into next year as we wrap up in 2022 here, if you can believe it or not. And with me today, we have two executives from Verizon, Lou Tedrick, the Vice President of Global Learning and Development from Verizon Wireless, and Adriana Lang, the Executive Director of Learning and Development from Verizon Wireless. Lou has been on many of our episodes, conferences, or maybe not our podcast episodes, but she's spoken at our conferences for many years. I want to share, they won 6 awards in HCM from Brandon Hall Group's Excellence Awards in 2022. So congratulations there. And just a little bit of background about Lou. She is, as I mentioned, a human resources professional with expertise in organization development, learning development, and employee relations. As the Verizon Vice President of Global Learning and Development, she is responsible for the enterprise-wide learning and development, including Verizon's learning strategy, leadership and executive development, upskilling, reskilling, product training, CS and sales training, all consumer and business channels, employee and outsourced vendors, customer training, business channel. I could go on and on and on. As you can see, she has a lot of responsibility. And that's why, based on kind of her experience and also Adriana, who is the executive director of L&D. She supports the Verizon Consumer Group organization. In her position, she leads instructional design and training delivery for the entire Verizon Consumer Group, including the customer success and sales organizations. Adriana manages a virtual team of over 440 employees supporting 100,000 learners. Adriana is a Verizon wireless professional with over 33 years of experience in a variety of positions, including learning development, knowledge management, customer service, marketing, operations, business sales and service, and leadership development. So yes, they both have a lot of experience and talent, and it's been an interesting time for organizations. Going through the pandemic, post-pandemic, social injustice rise, economics, wars, global wars that is impacting all of us. With that, that both Lou and Adriana sit in the learning organization, are leaders there, and so they have partnered with their talent acquisition teams to help bring on board great people and to retain them. And you've have heard the Great Resignation and how that has impacted our hiring process, our engagement, and it's a very different era that we're in right now, and with that, a lot of complexity around businesses and our strategy. And so, Lou, can you share with us how this has impacted your recruiting strategy and learning and your environment?
Yeah, I think Rachel, it's great to be here today and joining you. And we prior to all the events that you mentioned, we were blessed with having relatively low employee turnover in both our retail and customer service channels. And when we compare ourselves against others in the similar industry, and then when things happen with COVID, the Great Resignation, we were not immune to our employees looking at other opportunities. Still, I think we are lower than other organizations, but everyone was experiencing a surge in people looking for opportunities in other organizations. So So that was new. That was a new experience for us. We had to look at, might our talent pool be different than what we had had have we had actually recruited for in the past. Not all of our candidates had sales experience in technology. They might have had customer service experience through working in different industries, but we really had to take a step back and look at what are people coming in with and meet them where they are. And so in a few minutes, I'll have Adriana talk about how we had to do that with our new hire curriculum, because there was a certain level of expertise we were hiring in before then we may not necessarily have with our candidates today. We also had to provide our candidates with realistic job previews of working at Verizon. So what is it like to work in a retail environment? While you're still doing a combination of COVID safety protocols and having interactions with customers. We also have all of our customer service call center reps, inside sales reps, now working at home, and had to help them understand what that job was like, because it's not a work from home job like I have, where I have a lot of flexibility. When you are taking inside sales calls or customer service calls, you're on the phone for a fixed period of time. So people's vision of what work from home was like in those roles may not have matched, the realities of the job. So our talent acquisition team really needed to update realistic job preview and videos and information that we had for candidates to help them understand the roles that they were coming into. And initially, we saw some turnover during training, which we had not experienced previously. And that was driven by two reasons. One, a lot of the candidates had multiple offers or multiple irons in the fire because of the plethora of opportunities. So they may have taken a position with us, felt it out, and if another offer came in that looked better, they would leave during training. So we adjusted that in two ways. One, we did these realistic job previews to make sure that they knew what they were coming into. And then secondly, we looked at compensation, because that was another draw, not, a non-learning related draw that was taking candidates from us to other organizations. So we made some comp changes. And since then, we've actually seen that our turnover during training has leveled off, because people know the jobs that they're coming into. They're feeling well prepared during that process. And they're not being lured away by, competitive salary offers in other organizations. So those are some of the things that we did kind of wrapped around. And then the other thing I would share before I let Adriana talk about some of the things we've done in the new hire onboarding experience to really engage people and help them feel comfortable is we also experienced turnover within the L&D organization. And we've not had turnover hardly at all prior to this. So for us, that was an opportunity in some ways to bring in some fresh talent, but also that it created gaps for us at a time that we really had to be over accelerating in our delivery and development of our learning programs. So ramping our new people up quickly was one of the things that we needed to do during this experience. So I'll let Adriana speak to some of the things that her team did to address the challenges that new types of employees and turnover during training created for her team.
Yep. Thanks, Lou. And thanks, Rachel, for having us today. Really appreciate it. So as I think back on, what we've gone through and what we're going through, COVID and the Great Resignation, it really, as Lou described, kind of destabilized our workforce. And we found ourselves in a situation where we were a little bit behind the eight ball, both in the customer service and in the store realm. And that has a direct impact on our customers and on our employees both. So it was very important for us to go through a period of massive hiring, which we did in conjunction with our talent acquisition team, as Lou had said. And so we partnered very tightly. We really had to pull out all the stops to be able to host new hire for the amount of folks that we had, back to back nonstop classes. And for these frontline positions, it's multi-week new hire classes. It's not short. So it's very involved. And so kudos to the teams, if I could, for all that they did during this time, because it was Herculean work bringing on the thousands and thousands of frontline employees that we did in partnership with TA and the business. When you think about a hybrid workforce, it's not just, you don't just show up the first day and you start training. Equipment has to be shipped out, it has to be set up. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen even before the first day of training. So great partnership all around within Verizon. And if I think about what we were up against, everything changes also when you're remote in a hybrid environment. If you're a typical pre-COVID call center worker, you're walking into an environment where there are other people and you feel supported and surrounded, and there's this feeling of being part of something bigger. And so we needed to create those connections and recreate that vibe, but in a virtual environment. And that's something we'll need to continue to do going forward. And I think about just how important that is, because if a new employee doesn't feel connected to the company they just joined, they're probably not going to stay very long. And there
Right.
is the opportunity to feel isolated when you're sitting at home by yourself in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. So I think that's paramount to our approach. Obviously, we use technology, we use cameras as much as we hear about Zoom fatigue. Zoom and cameras really do connect you to other people. You can look in their faces, you can see expression, you feel part of a community. And I think that has been really a part of our success in terms of onboarding, training, connections. And of course, leadership. We have to partner with, whether it's retail or customer service, the leaders, to help create that, belonging and sense of community.
Yes, and it sounds like your strategy has evolved, based on almost everything and how you think about retention, engagement, even your benefits package, right? And competitive pricing or competitive offers based on the market. And even the structure. I think we were chatting the other day. It's interesting, just kind of the mindset of some of the newer generations entering, as far as the the work life balance that they're looking for, and kind of aligning that properly with with their overall revenue structure or compensation. So I think this is going to evolve a little bit too, don't wouldn't you say, as kind of the economy evolves, and kind of what we look at in coming year or two, how we are going to continue on this trajectory of offering all of this to her, and we want to. However, it's got to be right for the business, and it's got to be right, all aboard. I think sometimes right now, a lot of our newer generations coming into the workplace, they don't have a good understanding of of the amount of I think, just the amount of effort into their positions or their jobs or their expectations of some of looking back 20, 30 years ago. You would stay at a company. I mean, Lou, you've been at Verizon for how many years?
I've been here
Not to
for
put you on the spot.
24 years. Yes.
And Adriana as well. And so, I remember early on in my career, it's like nothing good happens in the first year or two. You really have to, like, you kind of have to stay the course to, um, you know, for your experience and for to be able I think, reap the benefits of the company, and the company of you as well. So it's interesting where we are, and you've done a really good job with your talent acquisition strategy and aligning with talent acquisition from a learning perspective and how you're developing and being creative. So is there anything else? Were there any surprises? Anything that you would have done differently, or are you thinking about doing?
So, Adrienne, I'll let you talk about that first, and then I'll offer my perspective when you think about work that you and your team had to do.
Yeah. So I think that looking at our curriculum is an always on kind of event, but certainly when you are taking what used to be in a classroom and making it 8 hours of virtual instruction, you've got to look at everything and make sure it makes sense and see if you can chunk it or make it shorter or more engaging or modernize it. There's so many things we've looked at. Also, different software tools that help our representatives get up to speed. Again, you've got to think about learning differently. There's no one sitting next to you, there's no one that can help you when you're stuck. You can't tap the person next to you for those home based agents. So I think we've really done a deep dive into how can we think about this differently in a hybrid world. And that's really helped us out. And again, leaning on technology whenever possible. Um, Other tools we use in the business, like Slack, are great. They allow our representatives to kind of raise their hand and get help in the moment. So that's just one example of trying to use technology. Um, and then the other thing I would say, and I don't know if this answers your question directly, but um, wellness. We've keep an eye on wellness because we've seen folks really start to burn out a bit. So we've helped support the organization through different initiatives around helping leaders understand what to look for and how to help their support their teams from a mental perspective, which traditionally we wouldn't lean in there, but it's what folks need right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing in our research that the wellness piece is such an important part of how people are dealing with the balance of this new normal, and the expectations of what it means to be in a virtual environment, and how because they can get a little bit burned out if you're not careful. And I think then that weaves into these all these other health issues that we may not be aware of. So the more that you can do to have resources or have different outlets for them to be able to tap into, that is very helpful during this time, and going forward even more so.
A couple of things that I think, as I reflected, have been surprising to me and have been real benefits. In addition to what Adriana talked about, was we had to do a lot of cross training because of where we needed our resources, and we were pleasantly surprised at how effective the cross training worked. And I think it allowed us as a business to think about, are there different staffing models that could potentially be tried and used down the road, where you have reps that perhaps can do multiple things versus a singular, work for a singular function. So that, we know we can do that. And that now allows our organization to be much more flexible in thinking about how we staff, how we surge resources where we need to, because we've created the curriculums that would enable that. And then I think another thing that was a pleasant surprise to us was um, we measure things like crazy. So we watch how our reps are ramping up, and we found in one area of the business that certain roles could become feeder roles for other roles. And we originally were staffing all those roles by hiring people from outside. And so it created, hey, this might actually be an internal mobility option for us,
Mm-hmm.
and a career pathing option for us. Rather than hiring everyone from the outside, we could bring you into a role and then move you into another role within Verizon. And again, it was once we saw how they were performing and ramping, and why some of the folks who were being hired externally were struggling, that
Mm-hmm.
that we actually recognize there's a base of knowledge they could gain in one role that we wouldn't have to worry about training them in the next role. And the job is so complicated that if you try to train them everything at one time, it was just, much more challenging for them to ramp as quickly. So those were some of the serendipitous things
Mhm.
that we learned. And then Adriana's team had been working on home-based agent curriculum for years prior to this. So we were in a slow roll as a company in making that transition. And we've talked about this in some other forums. We were able to literally get the whole workforce converted very, very quickly because we had that experience. So I would, my words of wisdom to my peers out there is these trials that we do and the things that we start slow, we might be surprised that down the road those learnings get accelerated, and we were very lucky to have that under our belt and could make it all happen very quickly.
And that's a good retention strategy. And also, one of the things that we see under diversity and equity, an effective strategy is having these rotational or job rotational experiences, because it allows people to cross train into other areas, or gain exposure to other people in the organization where they may not necessarily have access to, depending on their job roles. So we see that to be very effective when we are diversifying across different teams, and we're trying to really kind of give more of a enriched experience and skills. So that's also I think all of the talent and learning, talent acquisition, diversity strategies, they all have to be integrated with each other, and for them to be effective. And it's and again, that's a good example. And Adriana also, or Lou, when you're talking about it, I just want to refer back to mental health. That I think it was in 2020 during the pandemic where you received an award for a program that you had developed with a mental health expert, actually someone that had issues themselves, and they were very vulnerable, or very foretelling, and that's how he created his software platform. So now that we were talking about it, I just remember it was a very interesting program that you had, and you were recognized for it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. That was actually what I was talking about, and I think it's one of the benefits of being so integrated with the business, having a seat at the table. We hear things that are going on in the business, and what we were hearing from employee roundtables was just that they were stressed, that they felt overworked, that they felt anxious. And it all fell into this, mental wellness bucket. And we said, can we do something about that? Can we help? And so that's how we leaned in to create the program that started out just for customer service, but then was later bridged across the entire organization, because when folks heard about that, they said, wow, we need that too. We need that too. So um, I think as we've stepped back, as you've already said, it's a big issue we're facing as a society. So it's certainly bigger than Verizon. But we were really happy that we could help from a learning perspective to help people, deal with what they were dealing with.
Right. And as we wrap up here today, Luke and Adriana, please feel free to weigh in as well. As you look into next year and the next couple of years, what do you anticipate? And what will recruiting look like? Technologies. What are our needs? How do we prioritize all of these competing needs that we have, to hire the right people, to have the right strategy, or to have I think not the right strategy. I think it has to be an adaptable strategy where you're able to kind of understand your audience and the market, and how, what you have done to kind of continue to sustain and to perform. So, what are some of what are some of the big trends you're seeing, or is there any outliers that we can anticipate?
I think a few things you mentioned earlier, Rachel, that we have to really look at this as an end-to-end talent and HR organization. So looking at competitive pay and benefits that may be appealing to you at different stages in your life. So that if you wanted to have people stay with the company for 24 years, like Adriana and I, we've grown up with Verizon, and different benefits appealed to us at different times in our lives. So our comp and benefits team are looking at, how do we design compensation and benefits that enable that and would attract and engage talent for a career here, not just a job here. The other thing that we've been working on is really being very open with our employees about all the jobs that are available across Verizon. We've created a program called Talent GPS, where you can see all the different job families, all the profiles for the different jobs in those families. And then the learning team has created skill pathways that allow you, we pick the 30 most common skills from all of the jobs that we have in the company, and have curated them into self-paced learning pathways, so that if you want to come in customer service and maybe move into another part of the business, you can see what are the skills required to get that job, and then how can I actually on my own develop the capabilities, get some experiences. And we see things like talent marketplaces, talent mobility on the horizon as critical, not only to take the courses that you need, but then to have those experiences through gig assignments, rotations. We see that forthcoming, and are beginning to think about how we're going to implement that at Verizon. I think as I talk to my peers, most of us are looking at that as a strategy. So I think there are exciting times ahead of us, but I think we need to bear in mind that we're all competing for great talent, and I don't think that's going to change over the next couple of years. So it's incumbent on each organization to have that great employee value proposition, where you do feel included in the organization, that there is mobility for you, and that there are also things socially, volunteer wise, that make where you work an important place to work. I think people look at now more than ever, do my values fit the company that I'm joining? So I think it's very complex but exciting. And it's a really cool opportunity for the HR and talent organizations to bring to bear everything, all of our expertise, because now it all has to be rolled together and working, together seamlessly.
We're actually going to be putting a new survey out, if we haven't already done so, on EVP. We had one right before 2020 or 2019, and of course, it wasn't probably the best time to repeat it in 2020 or 2021. But now we're seeing the need for it as we're coming out of the post pandemic, and our framework. It'll be interesting to see what the study shows, in comparison to what we gathered in 2019, I think. So would love for you to take a look at that survey as well, especially before we go to market with it, which I don't think we have. But we're hearing more and more the importance of EVP, and it's really kind of that brings everything together. Lou, thank you so much for both of you sharing your thoughts here. And as you know, Lou, and Adriana, we're going to be including your perspectives in our HCM Outlook for looking at priorities and business priorities across different aspects of human capital management going into next year. And so, I just love kind of hearing your thoughts and what you've done and what you're anticipating for the years to come here. And you really have a good footprint on what your strategy and how you're executing on the strategy. So it'll be great to kind of continue to follow you and your team, and see kind of what kind of reflect on today versus next year. We'll have to have a 2023 kind of look back.
Well, you're very welcome, and we thank you for the opportunity to share what we've done.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you for tuning in. And we look forward to chatting more. Take care. Have a great day.